everyone. So I have a fun presentation for you. This is normally a, like another speaker said earlier, 45 minutes to hour presentation, but I'm going to squeeze it into 30 minutes and might have to skim over some things. But first of all, the fun thing that I wanted to do this is the first time I'm actually doing this in a talk. I have created an audience map. It's a really simple app, but if you want to quickly go ahead and, sorry, thanks, I got it. Is it on? There we go. Hey. Yay! I should have noticed because I didn't hear the feedback. All right, so it's a fun little app that you can just show where your favorite location that you have visited is. So we'll look at that in a little bit, but just go ahead and add your favorite location. You add your name, choose a pin, and map style, and search for a location. It's really simple. Not a lot of instructions, but anyway. All right, so let's get into it. So we're going to look at mapping libraries. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, just a little bit about me. I had a great introduction, so thank you. But yes, I did used to be a high school math and computer science teacher for 10 years, and now I'm in DevRel. For 2.5 years, I've worked at Esri as a developer advocate. You can find me here, and I'll have that up there later. Great, okay, so here's our agenda. We're gonna look at some intro to mapping concepts to start with, so vocabulary and the different terms that you'll need to know to understand what I'm talking about. The second part is going to be 2 different web mapping libraries that we're going to look at. And then 3, we're going to look at some integrations that you can do with these web mapping libraries. And then we'll look at some conclusions. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the role of mapping to start with. So why would you need a map? So the first general idea is maps are really important for visualization. So maps turn raw data into visual insights. And really a simple map, you can start with just a bunch of points, and it can give you context as to where those things are located in general, like location-wise in terms of, hey, maybe relatively it looks like it's pretty close to this location that I'm familiar with. So that's kind of the surface level top visual there. Then the second part is if you have a lot of different points or a lot of different data that you want to show on the map, there's different ways to visualize it with different techniques. So you can do clustering, which is that second one, or you can use what's called a heat map. So we'll look at a little bit of that. And they give you really more context into where maybe like concentrations of things are on your map. All right, the second one we all use, I'm sure most of us use Apple Maps or Google Maps to help us navigate. So whether that's driving or walking, it's really important. It gets us from A to B. And having that visual, not just the directions, but also the route, can really be helpful for context as well. All right, the third one is communication. So this is one that you can actually, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with using Uber Eats. So you can actually track where your driver is, bringing your food to you. Or you can, in Snapchat, see where all of your friends are if they have that activated. And then finally, a really important one is prediction. So we can use this for forecasting. So things like weather or traffic data. And these can help you plan for the future. But also they can help you observe things that have happened in the past as well. So if you observe trends that were happening previously, it can help you observe predictability for the future. All right, so let's look at a few key web mapping concepts now. All right, so the first one is base maps. So when you think of just a simple map, that is going to be your foundation, and in the GIS world, we call that a base map. So it's just your canvas, your simple map that has, maybe it has some like road names on it, but gives general context for things. Sometimes if you're using like a topographic map, it'll have elevation data, but a lot of times it's really just pretty simple, just the structure of what you need for your simple map. And this will be our foundational layer. All right, so let me get into data layers. So actually, it was funny, Tony's talk, he was talking about layers and other things. I was like, oh, this is kind of perfect for me to go right after. Anyway, so yeah, we have our foundational layer for base maps. And then on top of that, we can lay any kind of data that we have, whether that's points of interest. In a little bit, we'll look at bicycle locations in the area. It could be like address points, or it could be things like polygons. So it could be general regions. It could also be lines, right? So roads, various other things, maybe trails. Yeah. All right, and then finally, another major web mapping concept is geocoding. Is anyone familiar with geocoding? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so it's really just the idea of taking an address or a place and turning it into coordinates, so X and Y coordinates, so we know where it's actually physically located in the world. Great. Okay, so now let's look at some base map formats. So we're going to use two major formats. So the first one is raster tiles, sometimes called image tiles or static tiles, or sometimes even just called map tiles. These are always a fixed, consistent look, and that's because they're just images. They're literally just usually PNGs served to create your base map layer there. And they're really reliable in low bandwidth situations. So again, because they're just simple images. Quick and easy to use as well. So we're going to use those when we get into our first mapping library. Now the second one is vector tiles, and these are much more customizable. These are, very smooth. They allow for nice interactive experiences for the user. They're very efficient on all sorts of different devices. And you can have a lot of fun with them. Since they are customizable, you can change all the icons. They're not just still images. You can change basically anything you want about them. There's different editors out there that allow you to change the font style, the size of roads, or whatever it may be. All right, and then let's look at some base map styles. Okay, so there's so many different styles you could use, but I'm going to go through some general overarching ones. So street map, this is a classic map that you'll see in many navigation apps. So it clearly will show your roads, your landmarks, and your place names. The next one is satellite imagery. So this provides real world imagery, and it gives you a realistic view of the area, as you can see. This is really good for environmental monitoring or maybe a real estate application. All right, then we have terrain and topographic. So these maps, they do highlight physical features like the hills. This is the kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where you could potentially see the elevation values on these as well. All right, and then we've got dark and light modes. So this could be out of preference for the user in terms of accessibility, or it could be because you're visualizing data on top of the map and you really want the data to pop. So if you have really bright colored data on top of your map, the background you don't really care as much about. It's kind of just there for context. And then finally, we have our custom themes. And these are the fun ones, like I said a minute ago. These are a couple of different fun custom maps that I've made previously. You can do all sorts of things with them. All right, data layer types. So we have three different types of data layers that we're going to be working with today. And the first one is just your simple GeoJSON layer. Who's heard of GeoJSON? Okay, plenty of us. Probably all of us have heard of JSON. It's essentially just the same thing as JSON. It just has coordinate values or location data embedded within it. It's got a very simple structure. When you use it within an application, it's all loaded client-side. So everything comes to it from wherever you have it saved, or you could just embed it within your application, and it's all loaded right away. Okay. Then we have something called an Esri feature layer, which this is kind of a special in between. The two common ones really are GeoJSON layers and then vector tile layers. This Esri feature layers has some special features to it. Essentially, basically what you get is it is still a JSON format, but it's not all loaded at once, and it is served from the server to the client. So essentially, when you're looking at your map, whatever data is going to fit in that screen view within that extent, that's what's going to be served to the client, not the entire layer if it's not needed. Oh, and it's really good for live data too. So if you are constantly updating the data, it's good for that. And then finally, we have vector tile layers. So these are These are really good for large data sets. So your GeoJSON or your feature layer, you don't want to use huge data sets. And when I say huge, I mean, well, if you have maybe like 100 different, say, pins on your map, that's fine for a GeoJSON layer. Feature layers can handle a bit more. But if you're getting into the tens of thousands or maybe even more than that, vector tile layers are probably the way you want to go, unless you're wanting to do things like querying or showing only portions of your data. Vector tile layers, do keep in mind, are in such a way that they're not able to be updated like on the fly, like you are able to with feature layers. So they are a bit more static in that sense because they're pre-tiled, but they are served in a PBF format. So it's a much more condensed format that then the client can handle loading. All right. I'll get into my demo soon. So real quick, library commonalities. So we're looking at two main libraries today. It's going to be Leaflet and MapLibre GLJS. And the commonalities, they're all built in JavaScript, compatible with HTML, CSS, and they work across modern browsers. They are cost-effective, so no licensing fees. They are community-driven. You've got tons of active contributors to these libraries, lots of great resources out there too, lots of friendly communication you can have. And they're modifiable, of course, since they are open source, full source access, and they are interoperable. All right, they are pretty easy to learn. They're pretty straightforward. They're exactly what you would expect as a web developer. They do have extensive documentation on their websites. And in addition to that, there's tons of different resources out there. If you go to YouTube, Google, whatever it may be, you can just find so many different things about these libraries because they have existed for quite a bit of time, and a lot of people use them and contribute to them. And then finally, we've got our key features. So they're very interactive, very customizable, and they both do use the Web Mercator projection, which I'm not a geographer, so I will just tell you that Web Mercator is the projection that we expect to see. It's the one that we all use within our maps, whether it's Google Maps, Apple Maps, any kind of map you see digitally, it's generally the Web Mercator projection. All right, so let's get into Leaflet. Who's used Leaflet before? Nice, awesome, okay. Maybe about a third of us, that's awesome. So it's super lightweight, it's only about 42 kilobytes of JavaScript. It has tons of different plugins, which is really nice because it allows you to extend the basic functionality of the library itself. And it really does focus on simplicity and performance. So if you just need a map with some points on it, this is going to be the easiest, quickest way to go. It's going to take you maybe a minute or two to kind of load that up real quick. And you'll see that in a sec. Okay, then the other thing I want to talk about is another library, another open source library that contains plugins for Leaflet. So like I mentioned, it extends the functionality. So Esri Leaflet is an open source library. It was created in 2013 to allow for the integration of ArcGIS services, or Esri's location services, within a Leaflet application. So it really makes it pretty easy to do that. It's very developer friendly. It works. It basically abstracts the complexity of some REST APIs and actually makes it really easy to work with. You'll see that in the code in a sec. And plenty of documentation. All right, let's do a few quick demos. And I did just realize that I forgot to point out the QR code in the agenda. If you didn't catch that, let me put that back up real quick. This is the repo that has all the slides that I'm going through right now, and it has all of the code samples that I'm about to go through as well. So some of them do require API keys. I put that notes in the repo, but some of them you can work with right now if you wanted to with me. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to start with a very simple Leaflet map. Okay, first of all, I probably need to make that bigger. How is that for people in the back? Is that okay? Maybe one more? Okay, it's going to be giant. I'm just using CodePen for simplicity, but maybe I'll zoom out when we're actually focusing on the map, but I'm going to focus on the code right now. So this again, is just a really simple Leaflet map. So what I've done is I've brought in the library through CDN, just for, again, simplicity. So that's what I've done here. I've also, actually, we don't need Esri Leaflet in this one. Not sure why I brought that in. All right. And then I've set some styling here. So we have our map, which is just taking up 100% of the view height. And then we have no margins or padding for our body. All right, so here's really the meat of it. So we have inside of our HTML, you only really need one line of code, and that is your div set to an ID equal to whatever you want it to be. That div ID is what you will use here within your JavaScript. So when you go to define your map in the JavaScript, you have your L.L meaning leaflet, L.map, set it to the ID of the div. Then use this one. This is leaflet, so it uses latitude, comma, longitude, just so you know, which is backwards mathematically. So latitude, comma, longitude. The other library I'll show in a few minutes will be longitude, comma, latitude. All right, and then you've got a zoom level. And that zoom level, I have it set to 14. That's generally anything from like 0 to about 19-ish, depending on the base map style that you're using. Okay, the final thing that is definitely required when you're showing just a simple map is a tile layer. So this tile layer is your base map style. So what I've done is I've used the very common OpenStreetMap style. This is a really common one to use when you're just starting out, especially with a leaflet map, since it is loaded as, like I said earlier, PNGs. This is raster tiles. All right, so simple map here. Let me zoom out a little bit. It's very interactive. There we go. Yep, you can zoom out. And honestly, as I zoom out, you can see some of the tiles filling up the extent of the window. You can also see that within the browser's developer tools if you want. I won't get into that, but you can actually individually see each tile. All right, back into the code. The one other thing I want to show you is I mentioned data earlier. So we talked about base maps, and then I mentioned data layers. So I said GeoJSON layers are meant for smaller data sets. So what I've done is I've brought in a data set of bike station locations in Arlington, Virginia. This is public data, open data that you can just find online. So when I uncomment this out, we should see all of the bike stations. There it is. All right, there's only about 119 of them, so that was pretty instant. It didn't take very long. I did also append a pop-up to these, so that just tells you the location of the bike location. Yeah, so pretty straightforward to just put up a simple map and about 100 points. All right, on to the next one. Okay, so here's our next one. What we're doing here is, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, so once again, I have the simple setup of a leaflet map. It's using OpenStreetMap style. The only thing I've done is brought in several more CDN libraries, and I'll get into each of those as I go through more of the JavaScript code. Just know that I had to bring in all of these for different parts of the JavaScript code. We've got our style, we've got our map, and I'll zoom in for the code. Okay, so once again, we've got our map, we've got our OpenStreetMap here. And what I did now is instead of using a bike layer, I went ahead and chose a much larger layer. And this one is actually all of the tree locations in Arlington County. So there are about 29,000 of them, which is a lot. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to first show you, I'm going to load this as a GeoJSON layer. And honestly, we could count. I counted earlier. It took like 12 seconds for any of them to even show up. I'm super zoomed in right now. Let me zoom out a bit so we can see more of the map here. But you will see it's going to take quite a bit of time. In fact, my map is lagging. So the idea behind this is when you use a GeoJSON layer, it's going to take, oh, there it is finally. It's going to take quite a bit of time to load if you have many, many features. And look, it's still, see, I was trying to zoom out. Okay, so it takes a bit of time. Part of the problem with that is because, or really the main problem, is that you're loading all of it on the client right away. You're saying, here's 29,000 things, go. That's way too much. So let me get rid of that. And instead of using a GeoJSON layer, let's use what I mentioned earlier, which is an Esri feature layer. And so that was pretty quick. So the reason that really the difference there is that with a feature layer, all of it lives on the server, and it only serves to the client what's needed for the specific
extent for your window. So I can zoom out, and it'll start to, it might lag a little bit, but it's certainly going to be able to handle it much better than that GeoJSON layer. Again, still not ideal for several thousands of data points, but it works all right for this situation when you're especially focused in on a specific location. Another thing you could do if you want to use a really big layer that's a feature layer, and again, the main idea behind feature layers is they are editable, they could work in real time. There's lots of different reasons you should use a feature layer over the vector tile that I will do in a bit. Well, you could cluster them. Let's say you just want to get some context out of it. So we cluster, and there we go. We get all sorts of clusters here. You can change the cluster size, play around with all of that. There you go. All right, next one. I gotta speed up. So next thing we've got is, this is really cool, at least I think it's pretty cool. We have a geo search feature. So within Esri Leaflet, you're able to search just the world, which uses what's called the ArcGIS Online Provider. So you could just search anything you want here in terms of, let's see, well, there is a caveat. I'm going to get to that, but let me type this in first. So let's say I'm trying to search for the location of this center, or GMU. So that's 3351, Fairfax Drive. That comes up nicely, boom, easy. But what if I want to search for something like Paris? Well, that's not coming up. The reason is, when you use this, let me zoom in, geo search feature within a leaflet map, the default is to use the map bounds. So if I get rid of that, and then now search for Paris, it will come up for us. Nice. Cool. Okay, there's lots of other different parameters that you can use within the geo search plugin here. I'm not going to get into all of them, but just know that if you play around with the code, try uncommenting them out. Again, you will need your own API key, and if you're staring at it right now, it will be deleted in like 20 minutes anyway, so use it as much as you want. All right, so the other cool thing about geocoding, or the geo search functionality, is you can actually use a feature layer within the geo search. So I'm going to put that here. Let's see, so I've uncomment this out. Got it, okay. All right, so what I did is I put the trees feature layer within my geo search option. So when I go to search for a tree now, it's going to show me different common names of the trees, because that's how I have programmed it here to search for. And when I click one, it's actually just going to find the first one within the feature layer. And that's what it pinpoints. So it's kind of cool. You can search through feature layers with the geo search functionality. Okay, last one of my leaflet ones. Zooming through. So this is actually just showing kind of an offset of things. So instead of, if you don't have a set of data layers, but you still want to show different places around an area, but again, you don't want to use like your own data set, whether that's GeoJSON feature layer or whatever, you can actually use a places service. And there's many different ones. Here I've used the ArcGIS one, but I'm not going to go through all the details of the code because it is a bit long, but really all you need to know is that I'm using the bounds of the extent within the map, and this is going to find places within the extent. So when I say places, it's going to use the keyword or words that I put within the search bar here. So today is National Crunchy Taco Day, so I'm going to look for tacos. And yeah, I did know that. There you go. So there is some taco places around the area. So maybe if you want to go to a taco place at lunch, there you go. All right. And there's a bit more to this code, but I won't get into it right now. That way we can get on to our other library. Okay, real quick, let me see. Ooh, wow, we've got all sorts of places here. Now these icons are really tiny. I apologize. But you can actually, see that update live as well. So we've got lots of different places that people have put here. We've got Paris. We've got Switzerland. Yeah, all sorts of places. This is awesome. Puerto Rico, New York. Nice. Yeah, and just so you know, the way I built this application is I didn't actually use a feature layer, I basically just created a GeoJSON layer of points just being added as they were going on because, well, I figured, we wouldn't be more than a couple hundred at the most. So, but yeah, it's kind of fun. And I made it to where you could change the base map style if you wanted to, of course, which is always fun. Like that. Okay. All right. I have 6 minutes. Let's do this. So we're going to look at MapLibre GLJS. Now, the reason we say MapLibre GLJS is because there is a MapLibre native version for mobile applications. These are some takeaways. That's everything we just went through. Okay, so what is MapLibre? It's a fork of Mapbox because Mapbox, after version 1.x, once it went to 2, it went closed source. So people said, hey, let's make it open source. It renders graphics with WebGL, which makes it much more powerful for things like loading large data sets and very intensive graphics layers. And yeah, it's very customizable. So Leaflet has some customization options, but because it's able to handle vector tiles in a much more efficient way, you can create all of these different cool visual dynamic maps. And then within this, we're going to be using REST.js. I actually technically used REST.js with Leaflet a second ago with Places. This is really a wrapper for the ArcGIS REST APIs. It's open source. It's another way to just tap into location services. And it's exactly what you would expect, module promise-based. There is actually no map component to it. So it's all about location without the physical map. So it's either you're going to say, I just want maybe the addresses and the coordinates of places. Maybe I just want the directions, but I don't want to actually see the physical route because there is no map component. Or you take it and put it into another mapping library, like MapLibre. Okay. Speedy, here we go. So this is a really simple MapLibre map. I am using the I'm using the demo tiles, so it looks really silly. See if I zoom out. Here, actually, let me just change the zoom level to 1. So I'm just using demo tiles, so it's really simple styling here. This is just, yeah, it's really just what you could start out with for testing purposes. But there are so many different custom styles you can use out there. And again, these are all going to be vector styled, so they aren't PNG format. They come in through like a JSON style format. And yeah, I've chosen to use a MapTiler one. I've also chosen to use an ArcGIS one. Again, you will need your own API keys to test those out. But there's lots of fun things you can do, kind of like I showed you earlier with some of the styles. Okay, so moving on to this demo here. What I'm going to show you is we are going to load a feature layer. So we did feature layers a little bit ago. We did the bikes. Now I have a feature layer of all the schools in the United States. There are over 95,000 of them. So when I load a feature layer in MapLibre using ArcGIS REST.js, what's going to happen is it's actually only going to load the first 2,000 features. So I just uncommented that out, and we don't see anything. And why is that? Well, it's really because what it did is it only loaded the first 2,000 features, which just so happened to be what's at the beginning of the alphabet, all the schools in Alaska and Alabama. So that's what it did. So hey, okay. But I know there's a lot more schools in the US than that, right? So you're able to actually do what's called pagination to load all of those. I'm not going to uncomment that out right now because it's going to be a lot of load on my client side here, so we won't worry about that. But you can continuously, say, okay, give me the next 2,000, next 2,000. What will be good, though, is you have a couple options. You could query a feature layer, or you could use what I mentioned earlier is a vector tile layer. So if we use a vector tile layer, that's actually going to load super quick. It's going to zoom back in because I didn't change the zoom level in the code. But as you can see, I can zoom out, and it's got all the schools in the US. And it's pretty performant in terms of having to load 95,000 different points there. So again, this is a vector tile layer. I don't have time to get into how you convert a feature layer into a vector tile layer. Something you can certainly look up, or I could talk to you about later if you'd like. All right, very last thing. This is also using the Places service like I showed in Leaflet, but the cool thing about MapLibre is since it uses vector tiles, there's actually a base map that we have places embedded within it. So you don't even have to actually hit the Places service to get the places back to you. So basically, it shows your name and your place ID. That's what's embedded within the base map layer itself. Then you can tap into the Places service using the ID to get more information about the place if you want to. Okay, cool. All right, that was a lot of stuff. So this is everything we just went through. Simple styles, feature layers, vector tile layers, base map places. The last thing I want to tell you about is there's a couple fun different real-world examples that I found online. Craigslist actually uses Leaflet's map, and Outdoor Active uses MapLibre's map. You can actually see that if you go to the sites themselves. And I've lost my mouse. I see it went to my other screen. Okay, so here, I'm on Craigslist here, and we see it literally says Leaflet right there on the map. The one in Outdoor Active actually is a bit more nuanced, and I just closed it. But basically what you have to do is you have to go into the browser's developer tools, actually target that element of the map, and it'll actually say MapLibre within there. Cool. Okay, so final conclusions. Leaflet is really lightweight. It's got many plugins. It's really good for kind of more simpler situations or kind of fun, smaller mapping applications. And then MapLibre, it's able to handle much larger data sets. Again, it uses WebGL to render those graphics, so it's able to handle lots of different visualizations. Of course, there's a couple cons there. They kind of counteract each other. And that's it. Thank you so much.